Right, welcome back. Some wisdom from American TV series that I used to watch a long time ago, and it goes like sand through an hourglass. So are the days of our lives. You remember that one, eh?
In Dallas, didn't they start a series where he woke up and it was all been a bad dream?
So really, the message is: do we stop at 8 o'clock or do we just press on? Press on. Good. Let's do that. Are we ready? Hello. Are we ready?
I am Mark.
We're just trying to get it on the screen, but we can keep going. And then
Yep.
we'll put it on the screen.
Cool. It's all yours.
We're just getting it on the screen where we're at.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
Okay, welcome back everyone.
Hello.
Yeah. So we're just working on getting the, there it is. It was.
Yeah, so you just need to, depending on which one you want.
So after the changes that we made following recommendations, keeping the Waikanae recycling as it is, and not putting in the new swimming fees, and not keeping the $50,000 for the economic board, we're at 7.92. But what that means dollars-wise as well, so the $200,000 that Mark talked about that created a bit of headroom, and that's in OPEX. So with, because I was going to say it's 110,000, but we've taken it out because of the, because we put Waikanae back in, we effectively don't have any more headroom remaining. So everything from now on is further rates.
Sorry, Alyssa. No, when we did the slide, we had created, with extra growth, we had created a buffer of 200k, but we're now live. So what we've done is we've just taken the 200k out and we've just put in all the decisions that you've made to reflect. So this is a running total. Take the 200k out and you can see what the decisions you've made tonight. So this is where we're at based on the decisions, or some of the decisions you've made.
No.
We've removed that. We've removed the 200k. We created a buffer
Effectively,
for you,
we've used it.
and then you've been through some of the additional funding requests, and you've said yes. So we've removed it. So this is the live total with the insurance all back in.
Eaten up the 200. You've eaten into the 200. You've eaten into the 200.
No, we've just taken it out.
So that created space. You've now added in all these costs.
You added them in.
So because there is an agreement to not have additional swimming pool charges, and when we proposed it, that was put into the budget as a revenue item, because that's come out, it increases rates. Because Waikanae transfer station is now staying in, there's another impact of 123,000 because it had come out when we proposed closing it. So that, in addition to the ones that we had recommended include and you've agreed to, other than the Economic Development Advisory Board, brings the rates to 7.92. Yep.
7.92, yeah.
So from now on, for all these discussions going forward, it's going to keep increasing that number unless something else changes to reduce it. So the next couple of slides go through proposals from community organisations that, as you'll see as we work through, they're either already included in some way as opposed to needing additional funding. So we've lumped them together. So we've done all the ones that we've proposed, including new ones. Now we're on to ones that the groups have asked for additional funding and it's already included in some way in the budget. So the first one is Pykokoriki Surf Lifeguard. So their submission was around additional funding for their new club rooms. As you know, we had already allowed for $50,000 a year for year 1 and 2, and staff recommendation is that it remains as that, no additional.
Why has it got year 3?
Sorry, because they had asked for, so the rates impact was if we did what they asked for, so it'd be an additional 0.31 in year 1.
That would be 250,000 a year for 3 years.
So at the moment, that's part of the rates figure, that 50,000.
The 50,000 is, yes.
Yep, I think that's good.
Is there any?
That's fine. Next one.
No, James.
Oh, look, I am okay with that, but well, actually, a little bit not. But is that is it essential that it's in year 1? Could it be in year 2 and year 3, and nothing in year 1? I don't know what their work program looks like in terms of delivery.
They're really needing to raise some funds.
So there's something that we could go.
I think it was Councillor Holborough who got it in there in years 1 and 2, based on sort of your information, the 50,000. We hadn't put any money in there at all prior to the draft. But what we heard when they submitted is, yeah, they're quite advanced in terms of where they're trying to get to. So you still have those choices, that, as you've raised.
So you're okay with that?
Okay, so the next one is the Kapiti Equestrian Advocacy Group. So they asked for a number of things. What we've pulled out is the additional funding that would be required for the development of parking areas for horse floats and trucks, and we've estimated that at a cost of $20,000 and therefore a rates impact of 0.03. But what we are saying is that the other things that they've asked for, like signage and hitching rails and mounting blocks, can be done progressively over the next few years within existing budgets. So they're getting some support from what we've already got in our budget. But if it was the rest of what they're asking for, there's an added rates implication to that.
Yeah, look, I don't support this, not because I don't support the equestrian economy, because I do think it brings value to the area. But when I asked them the question around compared to other regions, are we reasonably well placed, their response was that they've literally spoiled in terms of the level of access and facilities that they enjoy. And that's great. It's testament to the work that you and the rest of the team have done. I think it's fine to do the other bits and pieces, but you've got other groups like the cycling groups that have requested additional funding, which might argue that maybe I don't know whether they haven't had the same level of commitment as been to the likes of Kia. They are one of the loudest and most sort of, I guess, vocal groups in terms of requesting more support. And I note also in their submission, there's numerous requests, including theirs, asking for more and more staff time. So I'm not going to die in the ditch over it, but I just think in terms of what has been done.
To be clear, we're saying no. all of these are no. We're telling you where there is money in there. For example, the 50,000 a year for the surf club. Generally, these are all, we said no. We're advising no, and it's up to you to change that if you wish. And see the impact there that it would mean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a question. So, in terms of the location of these these horse floats and trucks, are they around the expressway at all? So, I'm just wondering whether NZTA would have the opportunity, or they could be asked to provide any funds for this.
From memory, the submission didn't specify where they wanted. They've just generally said as we create or make available paths and trails that there should also be car parks to go with it. So there has been discussion with NZTA on some of the places along M2PP. So when the opportunity arises, we do bring it up with NZTA.
Thank you.
I would like them to submit this proposal again, project by project, frankly, as part of the consultation on those projects where they've identified sites.
So next is the Surf Lifesaving New Zealand. So this is the national body request for support, and we do already do that. So we're recommending that we continue support as we have done. Yeah, that's in already.
Yeah, so just clarifying that, so that's not going to, although that shows what the impact is, it's already included.
Yeah, sorry, it's confusing. If you took it out, you'd save that, which is a bit confusing because most of the time we're saying it's not in, and if you put it in.
So even though you say no, it means yes.
Sorry, in this case we're saying yes. That's an oddity, that one.
When I do this in my head, I feel like it's really clear, but I'm sorry I've caused confusion. I obviously haven't been clear.
In your head, everything's clear.
But I think I'm creating it, so. Okay, so tick. So Kapiti College, their submission was particularly around support for staff resource requested, and we had already included that in the draft long-term budget. So again, it's in their work program ongoing. That is the rates impact, but it's already within the now 8.2. Yeah.
And reconfirm what we got.
It does raise, I guess, give me the opportunity to raise the point. I'm going to, through the councillor session, raise an option there for Otaki. One example, when talking to Andy after him coming here, is not only is it a barrier and a cost for students to attend Te Rakura coming down, there's also a cost to go into it. And so there's additional funding on top of the funding that was given for the facility, now annually towards that facility. So I just ask you to remember that when I bring something to the table in the councillor session around support for Otaki youth and the social investment stuff.
So next one is the Waikanae Rugby Football Club. Their submission, they had presumed that the reorganisation of the money for the destination park was taking the money out of the budget for their changing rooms. That isn't the case, and I have clarified that with them since their submission came in. So there's still $725,000 in there for 25-26. They had asked for additional funding to help the club grow and work on their club rooms, etc. So our recommendation is not to provide any more funding to the rugby club. Nuku Ora, well, it used to be Sport Wellington, so their submission was for $10,000 per annum for a regional facilities advisor. If it was in, it would be an impact of 0.01. Staff recommendation is to not include that support.
No, I agree. We could not figure out what it is that they do.
Otaki Sports Club have asked, so they're at Huratai Park, have asked for $114,000 for lights around the tennis courts, that would be a rates impact of 0.16, and recommendation is to not include.
Can I request that that we make our fundraising advice available to them?
So the parks team person who works with clubs is in conversation with them. So at that level, there's funding advice as opposed to the resource that we have for recovery funding advice.
So Guru, I did have my name down. Just
Yeah.
so on this one here, can you just remind me what's the council position on lighting in general for sports fields and sports clubs? My understanding is that it's the same approach. Is there any examples where we've deviated from that and provided the funding? I don't know about the hockey turf and so forth.
So generally, the clubs have owned the lights in the past, but that's created a problem for us asset management wise. So if as they need replacing, we have gone and replaced if it's in, so like Otaki Domain, for example.
So I get all that, just in the interest of time, it's
Yeah.
about the initial
Yeah, so
infrastructure
no,
investment.
all clubs, when they come to us, we say, you fund the funding, we'll take over the asset and continue to maintain and
So let me
replace.
clarify. Second one, and this goes to what Councillor Holborough jumped in and said, and I've got this for a number of the other applications. So, for example, I think it's the Merrick's Music Kilns. We do refer to this funding person that's available to help with funding applications. And as I've said repeatedly, they're not available because they're busy doing other applications. So, I guess there is an underlying question to many of these applications is whether there would be someone available to help them seek external funding. This application and some other ones through there.
So the response that Natasha's team has provided for me in the past is that that role is for recovery funding applications and generally for council projects. That resource has given high-level advice about what funding may be available to clubs, but they're certainly not there to support actually putting in the funding application per se. But depending on where it is, so again, if it's a parks one, we do have a role in the parks team that works with clubs. It just depends on the level of support required.
Can I just clarify that? So, so it'd be helpful because a number of elected members are referring to public to that funding person. So if that is the case, if it's not COVID related, we need to get that messaging clear.
Yeah, I didn't know that role was COVID related, and in fact, it was talked about before COVID even existed. So if that resource has been rediverted into recovery, yes, it would be good to know that because I am pointing people in that direction.
We could clarify that, but I also just wanted to acknowledge that there are other staff in other roles, and Alison has already talked about some in the parks team, but likewise in our community development functions, there are staff who, as part of their existing roles, get alongside community organisations and offer support and advice in relation to funding. So I just wanted to make that clear because it's not necessarily a one ring to rule them all kind of situation you're dealing with here.
Kapiti cycling action. I guess to summarise, the things that they've asked to include would be a rates impact of 1.06, and staff recommendation is to not include.
So is any of that within existing budgets at all, and is any of that in later years in the LTP? Because we're talking about a 20-year plan, but to me the response seems like I don't disagree with it. I'm certainly not suggesting that we put in a 1.06% increase. Does some of that sit in year 5 or?
There may be some funding in the CWB space in the next 3 to 4 years. I thought in terms of a connection at Pykokoriki, but certainly the shoulder widening they talked about, the reviewing the speed limit, those are things we wouldn't. So we don't currently get subsidy on shoulder widening, and so that isn't in the current program for future. And the speed, they talked about reducing the speed on that midsection. That again, we consulted on that, and the rule that sets those speed limits suggests that it's fine the way it is in terms of the current speed limit. It may change. I know that the speed limit rule is changing with some legislation that's about to, they're consulting on, I think, shortly. That might mean that there's an opportunity to review it in another couple of years, but at the moment it's not currently on the list. And the signage they talked about, we did look at some threshold signage in both, I think, Pykokoriki and Tikoro a number of years ago, and the community weren't happy with the scale and the feel of that signage to the extent it wasn't in keeping with the local character. So again, that wasn't progressed.
With the opening of PP2O and the additional traffic going out through Waikanae through the lack of an interchange, wouldn't that mean that NZTA are up for any upgrades to Pykokoriki Beach Road as part of the revocation and, I don't know if it's mitigation or?
Hasn't been flagged currently in terms of an issue. Again, the increase in traffic on that as a result of that was still within what you'd consider to be reasonable for that, not for Pykokoriki Road itself, but for that lower section. Wasn't considered to be an issue, but yeah, and that's the current position, I guess. So we have a number of rural roads across the district that don't have a shoulder or are similar in terms of the design. So again, it isn't currently a priority.
A chance to make some noise and leverage it, we should. But you think we don't stand a chance?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting at our cost.
I think there are a number of things we've put pressure on NZTA to provide. Happy to raise it, but I'd be very surprised if they consider it has anything to do with Pykokoriki to Otaki in terms of revocation cost. But happy to raise it with them.
Let me make you happy. Next.
New Zealand Chinese Language Week Trust asking for $5,000, which would be 0.01%. So recommendation is to not include.
Next.
Kapiti Health Advisory Group who've asked for 80,000. Actually, I think it might have been 40. But we're recommending not included, but we will be reviewing advisory groups in year one, so this will be considered alongside that review.
Good.
Is it all right if I say a couple of minutes?
Yeah, say whatever you like.
I better not do that. So I'm okay with this, and it's really good. As also with the health and local government reforms, the advisory group may have to change anyway, but it is really good to see that will be included in some discussions. So thank you for that. And does this mean you're reviewing like the CWB and a road advisory group and the accessibility group as well? Or are all those going to be up for reviewing?
We haven't entirely agreed the scope, but yes, my expectation is that all of our advisory groups or similar collectives that maybe aren't considered an advisory group at the moment, but are a little bit like one, such as CAHIG or the Multicultural Council, would be something that we would take a look at as part of the review. Next one was the request from Shelley Warwick around the learner licensing in Otaki at a rates impact of 0.05. Whilst we acknowledge it's a good idea, the recommendation is to not include, but could possibly consider for the next annual plan.
And kind of covered off as maybe the activity of a future Otaki So I agree with your recommendation.
Oh, look, I agree with Councillor Elliott. I think it is the idea has merit. The feedback that I'd had was that the actual application of it itself might not have been quite right, and that there were an opportunity to look at it through the social investment funding in some way to address that issue, if that is approved.
Citizens Advice Bureau request for $10,000, 0.01 rates impact, not include.
So I just want to bring this one to the table for discussion later in the councillors. I don't know if it's more appropriate then or now, but the councillor session. The CAB's funding was withdrawn through the social investment funding. They had about $40,000 at the time in their existing reserves, and that's down to about 20 now. So that funding is reducing. Parapara Umu CAB was successful in raising their own funding through initiatives and through the assistance that staff provided around finding additional sources of funding. Otaki CAB weren't. They're a different mix of people, different types of volunteers that run that facility. They've been busier after COVID, and interestingly, a lot of the referrals come from council staff at the library, and a lot of it around finance related. And so with the proposed increase in rates, their request is for 10,000. I'm suggesting that we might look at 5,000 outside of the social investment funding, but we can talk about that later if you want to. Now would be best. And the other funding was around maybe just supporting them further around other funding options. But again, if we keep coming back to that and there's no one to help them with that, then that's not an option we should offer them.
So Janice will probably speak, but staff have been working hard offering them a lot of support, and they keep declining it. All they want is cash. And so we're going, well, you're actually not accepting our support. You just want the money so you can decide how to do it. That's not really an approach that we think is worth supporting. The other CAB did take their support and got results out of it. So I'm probably oversimplifying, and if Janice wants to, she can expand on it. But those are some of the reasons why we don't support it.
I can expand on that a little bit, if you want me to, Mr. Mayor. I do believe that from a staff perspective, as the Chief Executive has outlined, that we have offered support in the past that hasn't been taken up. I do acknowledge a point that Councillor Coots made to me when we were talking about this, which is that Otaki is different, and as a group of volunteers operating the CAB, they as a group of individuals are potentially a little different to the volunteers that staff other CABs, and that is influencing the approach. So I guess my feedback on this piece is that if you are considering making a funding allocation here, that we continue to keep it very separate to the social investment program, because we worked hard to make sure that that there was a clear distinction between outcomes focused activities that were being funded and other things that had become more like an administration grant.
I just got a follow-up question, and if it's not for public discussion, what type of support have we offered? Just because I honestly don't know.
My understanding from staff is that we have offered to get alongside the CAB and explore other potential funding options with them. I think we were encouraging CAB to possibly explore possibilities that they hadn't explored before. And I believe there was a reluctance to do that, but I must acknowledge that I haven't been the one having these conversations, and that is just my understanding.
Unless we can tease out what avenues of funding for them, and if they're not picking up with it, what do you do?
Can I just say something specific? I think they would qualify for a $10,000 quick grant. You can apply any time from the Wellington Community Trust, whose focus is Otaki and Porongoa.
We can pass that back.
Could we ask through you, Mr. Mayor, for a bit more information, and we can take it offline, because I think there's further discussions. No, I wasn't suggesting that, because I think the Deputy Mayor had a straightforward suggestion. I was just saying I think this discussion needs to continue, but based on the evidence, we wouldn't fund. That's what I think I was hearing. James, am I summing up?
have not taken up the social investment advice and model like other different groups of volunteers, and they've lost volunteers, so they're different. So maybe, for example, I think running this nights and stuff like that, this group are different.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is it possible that we could say, following Councillor Cootes' suggestion, allocate $5,000 if an application, as the Deputy Mayor suggested, is not successful? Is that possible to do that?
Could I make a suggestion? I know they've got enough cash reserves to get through this year, so I appreciate the suggestion. Maybe we see whether that $10,000 funding is available, as Councillor Holbrook has said, and if not, it's a discussion for next year's annual plan.
There's got to be medium-term opportunity in terms of what we're going to do up in Otaki as well. And so that it doesn't solve the problem today, but we do want to weave that into what does a community hub look like, but that's a bit more medium term.
Sorry.
Look, I had that in my notes. It's a tricky one because they pay $10,000 to $11,000 a year lease for a single building. There is this discussion around a community hub model. They could or could not be in there, along with other community groups that all pay leases. But then, as Janice has said in an offline discussion, whether that's still rent, whether they pay it to us or a landlord. However, to a landlord, it's going to a landlord, and they're keeping it. To us, it's going to us, and it is a little bit different. But I agree, Wayne. There is a wider discussion there around community services within that community.
James, also Otaki Food Bank, asking for $10,000 money for rent, so rent for a space. So same thing, maybe in that community hub. Otaki Food Bank. Yeah, I found in there.
Test Councillor Holbrook's theory.
Litmus.
It's only a theory at the moment.
You said it was like that. Well, you click your fingers. I heard it from you twice, so it's a fact.
They're going to be inundated with applications for more Otaki soon. They're going to have to
Thanks for saying that on TV. Yeah, thanks for saying that on TV.
Wellington Regional Healthy Housing Group asking for FTE role, rates impacted 0.11. Recommendation is that it's not included and will be considered through the district plan and DC's review in the future.
Explain that, how do we do that to the district plan and development contribution? What?
So I think there's multiple items and you summarised it down quite well. Multiple items. Part of what they were asking for is what are we doing to make sure there are healthy homes being created, and can you contribute to funding for the FTE? So we don't support that, and we're saying the other things they're asking for come through in those other processes. What are the rules about healthy homes, and how can we incentivise them through our rules basis, and things like DCs if they're doing certain things. It's all for the future. So sorry, as Alison said at the beginning, some of these submissions were quite lengthy and said a lot. We didn't replicate all of that. We've summarised it way, way, way down. Not helpful, I know, but
Oh, sorry, mine was for the one before. It was just like, I was just going to suggest maybe looking at Pemba House and Porirua for the citizens' advice. Sorry, so I'm a bit late. But so what it is there's a place called Pemba House. It's directly across the road from the courthouse and the police station. And within Pemba House, there's it's like a hub of services. So you can go in there for advice from Whātira Community Law, which has since moved, but then there's Citizens Advice, there's Women's Refuge, Refugee Office, there's another office that has support for children going in and out of Oranga Tamariki SIF services, so it's all in one hub, so it sort of just spoke to what you were talking about then, but that's a place to start, I suppose, for Otaki to start looking for other alternatives.
New Zealand Memorial Museum Trust asking for funding that would be the 0.08% rates impact. Recommendation is to not include.
I'm happy to take one for the team and do a site visit.
And then you can never come back.
I was just going to say that it's Sir Don McKinnon literally emails and sends it to every organisation under the sun. So I mean, he's putting in the hard yards, but yeah, I think it's not something for us to fund. Yeah, you can't fault his effort. That's for sure.
Okay, so this slide is starting to get into the ones where we're saying that they're already in the work program, or we're noting what has been brought up. A lot of these were quite detailed ones, and they've been summarised at a high level on a one line. So the first one is Rangiuru by the sea.
Can you just say, look, everything looks okay because it's in work program, you take the work program?
No. Should we do it by exception, maybe?
Yeah, do it by exception.
So I've got it's actually just a clarification, Mr. Mayor. It's around the alcohol licensing policy, mostly because we actually have heard, and I don't even know where we've heard it from, some of the timeframes for the policy work. So I would appreciate if we could just hear what the actual timeframes are so that we can not spread rumours.
So we talked about this slightly earlier today about the local alcohol policy in particular. There were some other things they wanted, like making sure that they were contacted when there was an application in their area. And Mr. Jefferson can assure you that we are working on solutions to automate that, or to make sure that happens. In terms of doing the LAP, it's underway. Natasha wasn't kidding when she said other councils have found it's been a 2 to 3 year process to land successfully, because it is highly contested by the big deep pockets of the alcohol sector. Yes. And it is actually legitimately what was partly behind the reasoning 3 years ago or so when the council decided not to pursue one. You're really caught in an awkward place. Having one, as we know, will really help with decision making in an area. Getting one is really expensive and difficult, and 3 or 4 years ago, councils like ours were just really averse to trying it because there was no signs of success. The world is quite different now. You have committed that we do it. The time frame looks like could potentially be 2 to 3 years to actually successfully land one through any appeals process.
So I think the clarification that we would want is that the work that we would be starting would be much faster than that. Obviously, subject to appeals, it could push it out. But if there were no appeals, what type of time frame are we looking at?
A bit less. I mean, you're asking me the absolute impossible, as you well know, and all I know is the work is underway now. So the policy work and then the process you have to follow, I assume, is consultation and then coming back to here. So I'm really reluctant to give you any indication of whether you can actually do it in 6 months or not, should there be a tailwind and no appeals, because I just really don't expect that.
You gauge that from the processes other councils have gone through, and you sort of roughly know.
But I do.
The same players will be opposing.
They will. They oppose it everywhere. But I do think you're getting a briefing soon from the team about the process and timeline.
I do want to touch on, I'm not going to drill down to every submission like this, but I do want to touch on theirs, because I know, having been through the process before, sometimes there's some generic responses because we can't write individually to all 700 submitters on their individual questions. But some of their ones, to me, from my limited knowledge in this space, isn't actually legal. So for example, number 2, provision of staff time to assist in writing, crafting submissions and so forth. So are we actually going to go back on this one? It's probably a little bit different than the others. There is one area which we, by the sounds of it, talking to Mr. Jefferson, we are trying to do some work in around the notification. But then the fourth one is actually notifying Otaki as a community on any relevant policy or practice or kind of matter that has relevance to Otaki. So that's, there's actually a lot in that submission. So I'm worried that it's just kind of not.
All of these are going to get individual responses. So
Okay.
it's only the ones that have gone into Engagement HQ that are going to get the generic bullet point.
We can move on there.
But these individual ones are different.
Ones like these need it.
Is that Kapiti Health, Paraparaumu Permanent Food Bank? Yep, sorry, that'll be the one I mixed up with the Otaki. Okay.
Didn't think there was one for Otaki. Rangiora by the Sea, I'm not going to go into the detail of the submission, but it's an example where they've submitted previously, and there's been, we're going to respond to this. We might say yes and no to some stuff and respond to it through our work program, and then 2-3 years later, we haven't. We might have on some things. So my point is, and on these and on others, if we are going to respond to them, that it is a 20-year plan, and that we actually go through that submission, same as Rangi, same as, I guess, some of those other ones.
I can speak specifically to that one if you want to. So with Rangiora by the Sea, we are intending that staff working in our local outcomes area will get alongside the group. This will be the second half of the year one of the LTP because those resources are tied up on other projects for the next few months. And so activity managers from across the business have identified the activities that have already been put in place that were in the plan. They've identified those that we don't believe should proceed, and then we'll also identify other areas where we might be able to have some conversations about the intent behind the suggestions and how that might be reflected in the work programs. And that would be how we would want to approach it in the future when submissions like this one from a group of residents come in.
So this slide is similar, either in the work program or will be added following. Also, I guess start with the disability advisory group, slightly different. So it's around the formation of the disability strategy. So what we're saying is it will be recommended, be added to the program following prioritisation by council. Next one is in the work program or noted. So some things are in the work program, some things are just of note as opposed to responding to. Pool Hughes is the same. Water Safety New Zealand is all in the work program. Guardians of Kapiti Marine Reserve Trust, it's more in Greater Wellington's realm. And then the following one is noted and then work program.
So I just have a question about how these ones were selected from the 900 submissions, because we've got submissions here from Eben Freshwater, Anne Gleeland, Fraser Beggs and Te Puna Oranga Otaki, all for an indoor sports facility of some description, and I'm just wondering, they would be on a list like this that says additional funding required, but they're not even on the list. I've been through them already online.
So these are the ones that came in outside of Engagement HQ, specifically asking for proposals, so not through the online survey.
Are these ones here all spoke at the hearing?
Some did.
Some did. I don't know about Te Puna Oranga Otaki, but the rest did.
So there were 88 separate proposals outside of the online consultation, and this is all of them.
These ones, I guess, did the online consultation then, but they came with requests and they spoke at hearings. So the people who spoke at hearings or did the online not get onto this sort of list for consideration?
No, they were treated separately. So if they've gone on to the online consultation and specifically referred to, so if they referred to the sports centre being built, it would have been in response to our comment in the major project that asked for feedback. So their feedback may have said, without knowing the individual that you're talking to, that they support a sports facility, for example, but that hasn't been brought forward because it's in a different context than these ones.
Yeah, so what about the two or three that actually, they must have, that's part of the hearing. And so that's not doing online submission, that's speaking for the group at the hearing.
But they made an online submission in response to our questions and came and spoke to it. So anyone could make a hearing regardless of what type of submission they made. So some of those individuals that came and spoke, they responded online strictly to the questions that we had asked in consultation and chose to come and speak to that.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I just wanted to follow up on the Guardians of the Kapiti Marine Reserve. It's just been referred to Greater Wellington Regional Council. Is just generally being referred to that because that's where it lies? Do we have a contact, or I'm happy to follow that up offline or something along that sort of line, but I'd like to follow through on that one if possible. Who's that?
Yep, so at an elected members level, it would be Tini Gaylor as the regional councillor for Kapiti.
And Win got the number.
So next slide again, or either noted or in the work program. Noting that the Otaki Players Society is in the work program, but in 34-35.
So just on that one there, noting that they have just the Otaki players around the theatre had a significant investment within that facility in the last 12 months. That aside, the one thing that came out of the submission that did, I guess, raise a question for me was the existing fire door was hard to open and the wooden frame was rotten. Given that it was a fire-rated door, I thought that would have been a health and safety issue. I know it's a minor thing out of their entire submission, but from it's a fire door. It's supposed to be easy to open in the event of a fire. I thought that at least should be dealt with. The other stuff, I think, are all good things, but given the investment there, I just thought they would sit. I didn't realise that far out, but further out within the work program.
Yeah, I'll just make sure the property team are aware of it. Yeah, I'd imagine they probably already are, rather than it's just come through a submission, but I'll follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Waikanae Residents Society, they had quite a detailed submission, and one of the items they had in there was the Waikanae Beach Hall. And so I just wanted to, and so that's a submission, that's something that they've put a submission on for a number of years now, and so is the community board. And I'm just, so that building, it's determined to be earthquake prone, and it's got to be repaired by 2033, I think it is, but there's nothing in the work program other than I think there's one lump of $250,000, and whether or not that's actually going to make it not earthquake prone, or how is that going to be managed? Or, I suppose I'm surprised that a building of that, poor state doesn't have any, really decent funding in the long-term plan for it.
So the previous council agreed a policy about what order prioritisation we would respond to the buildings and when. So I guess it actually comes back to revisiting that and seeing if you want to change that. And I guess if Sasha's aware of any new information that's come to hand that might cause us to change that for a different reason, we would take that into account. But you're really going back to the policy when we introduced all of the building reviews as to what was agreed with the council of the day in terms of when we would do what.
So the fact that earthquake-prone buildings such as that, well, in fact, I think there's a sticker saying it's got to be prepared by 2033, which is in this long-term plan, but there's actually no plans to do that. Is there more information out there that what council has plans for, I suppose, for that building?
Given that we've got a list of priorities and given what the council is raising, do we now need to go and review that so that the work is there in time for when the buildings become defunct?
To be fair, it was staff recommendations based on the very commission. I thought
If I can hopefully shed some light through Mr. Chair, the conditions assessments. So in many of these buildings, we're undertaking seismic assessments to understand their NBS ratings and what's involved to get them up to speed in terms of minimum requirements and the costs involved in that. Right at this moment, I can't tell you exactly what's planned for that building, but I know that there has been, I've signed off the ability for a Maya Motor to undertake a seismic assessment, and I think it's on that building, but I've just got to double check through my emails if that's okay, to get a understanding of what's required and the NBS rating for that building and what's required to make it compliant in terms of seismic strengthening. So if you can give me a minute, I'll have a look for that, because there is a lot of buildings and there's a lot of stuff going on in the property area at the moment, and because I'm new, I just can't remember if that's particularly it in terms of that strengthening, but I'm pretty sure that that's the recent direction was to do a seismic report so we know exactly what we're dealing with.
But we'll bring that back on Tuesday. It's not really reasonable for us to worry about all of these now. These are the sorts of things that you've asked a question and we can bring it back.
Just make sure. Yeah, I thought there was. So, Te Huranga Rangatahi, there was the submission around the youth approach. We've already obviously had the staff feedback around the social side of things. For me, this is the other one that I'd bring back through the councillors' requests around a specific focus on youth in Otaki, seeking $50,000. I go back to the Chief Executive's point around not doing a knee-jerk reaction and running out next week and leasing a building, but having the funds available in there to first have a kōrero with the youth o rangatahi in Otaki. Been talking with Sophie about that as well, getting an understanding of what they think would help in that space and what that looks like, but then having the funding there to be able to respond to that once we've had that kōrero discussion. So there's, I think there's at least 4 from memory, and a lot of submissions to work through, and I've annotated much of it, but I think 4 to 5 submissions at least that I can recall that touches on more things for youth focus for Otaki. And so I would, I know we're sitting at 7.92%. I think I've calculated it at about 0.06%, I think. So it will require an increase, but I really implore councillors to consider this. Zeal, I do want to make clear in talking with at least Andy, he did say that Zeal are doing some good stuff in Otaki. It is just not meeting the needs of a lot of our youth because it's very specific stuff that they're doing for a specific group. The last point I want to make, the point that I want to make is that the contract with Zeal is up for renewal soon. So this may not look like 50,000 per year ongoing. I don't know what that discussion is. We want to add to that, Wayne. Haven't spoken to you about that, but I see this as in year 1. I don't know. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to see the funding stop and then the centre closes. That's terrible as well. But simply that there could be a further discussion around the renewal or expiry of the Zeal contract.
I just wanted to acknowledge that a public workshop is probably not the right place to be addressing some of those questions that are around contractual obligations that we have. But my sense is that you are talking about different types of activities to the ones that we currently fund.
So I think this is a very good example where you're bringing something to the table that is picking up on everything that's going on, isn't specifically been a request from somebody. This is a good time for you to put this on the table and for you all to give us a steer in or out, and we'll take it forward from there. Thank you.
Yeah, Otaki Players Society, I would just be really interested in some feedback on why a toilet upgrade.
Sorry, Councillor, we're
Sorry.
just addressing Councillor Coots' one at the moment.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I didn't get a sense we'd actually resolved it.
Could I just say that there was a specific request in the submissions, number 37, around the youth community centre.
But because they come up line by line, I think it's totally, if councillors are happy to be this flexible, bring it up as we get to the appropriate line rather than, because it'll feel like, hang on, haven't we already talked about that?
Yeah,
So,
that's my worry. Sorry, Guru.
so we're really comfortable to pick it up here. I hear what you're saying, so really it's these are where it's in your hands to just tell us what you'd like. If everybody agrees with Councillor Coots, then we add it in.
Sorry. Look, on the Otaki Players submission, not yet. I'm sorry, I'm on it and it's...
No, we're talking about James's.
Okay.
Sorry, Jackie, sorry you missed it there. I'd like to support Councillor Coots' submission. It really was what I was talking about at an inappropriate other time. That I think this is absolutely necessary. And the only thing I can add, which I'd previously said, is the need for some urgency. And I recognise the comments made about a knee-jerk reaction, but my urgency was to make sure that we don't put this on the back burner and watch a year go by before we take any action. So I want to support what James has said.
Sorry, James, I might have lost concentration for a second. What exactly is it that's on the table here? What is this $50,000 going to get us?
So in a simplistic form, it could be a youth space in Otaki, and in order to do that, you'd need to lease a building or a space to do so. It'd need a modest fit out in terms of making that space comfortable for young people, and then potentially other, whether it's pool tables and air hockey tables. But the point is that that discussion would need to happen with youth. I can't presume what youth want, but what we don't want to do is have that discussion with youth and then tell them we've got no money to do what they want to do. So you've got to have a budget to be able to do something, and then look at, you might not need all that budget. We did talk about some lower figures as well, but the other side of that is you don't want to respond to youth and say you're going to do something and then find out you don't have sufficient funding to be able to deliver it. The big question is around whether it needed to fund, and many years ago I've run a youth space myself, and the challenge isn't actually the building, it isn't the fit out, and it isn't what goes in there. It's actually providing a safe place for people to be able to go to, and with that potentially is having someone on site. And so you need to be some further discussion around that. It could be a volunteer. It is the type of community where you have that aspect of it, but essentially you need some funding to be able to go out and have the discussion. So the funding isn't for consultation and discussions, it is for doing, but it'd need to be youth-led, community-led, and with the other Te Puna Oranga, the colleges, kura, and so forth.
So is this on top of the $50,000 for social investment? So what's the $50,000 for social investment for?
Yeah.
I'm just sorry, I'm just trying to find out exactly what it is we're agreeing to do. Not that I don't support it.
Just waiting to go ready. The increase in the social investment fund tagged specifically to Otaki was noted as a way of addressing a range of equity issues in Otaki, and what specific issues might be addressed and what outcomes are sought is something that would be worked through as part of the priority setting around the social investment program, which kicks off early in the new financial year.
Okay, so I support this, but I'm feeling a little bit like what we are exactly suggesting is a space and not what goes in there. I mean, this is what we faced when we got Zeal in the first place, and we went on, a road trip visiting a whole lot of youth spaces, some of which were leased and nothing really happened in them. When I was first on the community board, we had a youth space in Paraparumu. It didn't work and we closed it down. It's actually quite a tricky thing to deliver. And I'm really keen that we start that conversation in Otaki, but with the proviso that we don't just jump in, boots and all, leave the space and hope for the best. That's painting a pretty dire picture, but yeah, if the ward councillor thinks that this funding will help get something on the ground sooner, then I'm willing to support it.
Yeah, I definitely like to support Councillor Coots' suggestion, and having had conversations with him, there's Mr. Mayor, having had conversations with Councillor Coots over the last couple of days, am comfortable that this will at least go some way to the concerns and also the kind of wants and needs of young people, not only in Otaki, but actually for our young people in the southern end of Kapiti to actually have a space to connect with the youth from Otaki in. So I think it's I've heard that from the Youth Council, I've heard that from Te Ana Mata, the youth group that works alongside the Youth Council as well. So I think, as Councillor Coots has said though, what the space is, what the space would look like, all of those things, that needs to come from rangatahi and Otaki, because I don't claim to know exactly what would work best for them to achieve the kinds of outcomes that they would want from some kind of space. And the other thing with that is even having conversations around the lighting that the Youth Council brought to the table around wanting some better lighting in public places. The main feedback from Otaki youth on that was that they don't even have really a space to go, let alone so lighting in public places won't necessarily help, because one, there's too many places that would need to be lit to make any investment in that worthwhile across the whole of Otaki, but actually just having a space to go to connect with friends that's outside of school is really lacking, whereas youth in Paraparumu have that. So I think it's an equity thing, but it's also just addressing concerns that have been shared and that are getting, I hate to say it, but pretty dire when people just want to, it's a sense of well-being, it's that connectedness thing. It's just with a little bit of money, 50,000 in the scheme of things, it's kind of when it could achieve so much for these young people. So I would just encourage you all to really think about this in the sense of what it could mean to potentially quite a large group of young people, and also the connection between youth in Paraparumu, Waikanae and youth in Otaki. So
Can I just jump the queue and ask Sasha?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, just for something to consider in particular around this discussion is we do currently have buildings that potentially could be available, and I think it might be worthwhile, if we're talking about leasing at a cost to council, to potentially investigate the options there for council to consider if there is an option already available.
Really?
There's been an upgrade with shovel-ready funding for memorial halls, and we got the Civic Theatre in Otaki done. I was just curious to know why there were the toilets weren't upgraded and the disabled toilet put in, because it's come back to us in a submission.
Oh, look, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I mean, I've thought of some spaces myself. I'm not familiar with all of them, but the reality is there'll be required some funding. I don't know what happens if you find you only need 25 of the 50. I mean, that's not unusual in terms of other council projects where you don't use all the funding. But either way, you've got to wait for it.
No, just that I support it.
What?
what Martin and Sophie and James said.
Actually, in that case, I'd say I don't support it because it's doubling up because there's two lots of $50,000 now and nothing going to the kids of Paraprame who've also made requests. So there's other kids who are quite disadvantaged in other parts of the district. You really are.
Put us at 7.96.
No.
I'm just saying we could get back down to a reasonable rates level if we rethink our provision of recycling in Waikanae.
If I may just jump in, just to remind everybody, you're going to know what this all is by the time you go out the door, and you may have some thoughts now, but also let's all collect our thoughts over the next few days so that on Tuesday we're saying, well, the starting position is this, but you may now want to do some things. It'd be lovely if you've resolved it all before you walk out the door today, but if you haven't, we don't want too much to have to do on Tuesday, but you do want a chance to reflect and come back and go, yep, I'm still happy with that, or no, I'm not.
Maoris do it is you stay there and then you decision by exhaustion.
Yep.
Anyway, next.
So we've got 5 more of these slides and then opening up the table for things that we haven't caught up to yet. So we're doing well. We are doing well. So again, all of these are either work program or noted. So if I may, Mr. Mayor, by exception.
Quick reading.
So, why can I watch? It says that something's in the work program. So, yes, I'm just wondering what particular work item that is.
And you'll just bring up the submission so I can refresh my memory, sorry. We'll come back, if that's okay.
Yep.
I suspect what's not in was the connected walkway that they came and spoke to, but we'll find out in a second.
I was hoping that was the bit that was.
Maybe I'm totally wrong, but I'm not. I would have thought Alison would have piped up. She would have probably known if that was in. Probably what's not in is huge pay rises for all elected members because you're so wonderful. I'm pretty sure that's what they say.
As viewed on Why Can I Watch? Hope it's not. Turn that off.
So no, sorry, councillor, the walkway's not in, at least not at this time.
The hall and the walkway. The northern bank of the Waikanae River, connecting State Highway, I think.
Yeah, going under the State Highway.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pick up on Rachel Barwell's submission, which was about more focus on climate change, and all the other submissions that were along the same lines. In our response document, can we have some hefty detail on the amazing work we do around emissions and footprint reduction and supporting community groups and anything we can think of that we do.
What?
He has. He really has.
I reckon that'll be
So
the clincher. Absolutely, but bearing in mind that the position they're coming from is everything you're doing is not enough, rather than, I think they're very aware of all the things we are doing. They've had a lot of input through Jake and the action group in particular, which Rachel's, I'm sure, associated with. They know exactly what, and they know what we've picked up from their suggestions. They're going to keep pushing harder, but that's not to say we shouldn't go back and make sure we're officially saying, we are doing all these good things.
Sorry, can I just say something on that too? I think part of what I took from all of their submissions were vision, policy direction and strategic thinking, and so that sits in and above and around everything. So I think it's less so for them seeing really concrete investment through the long-term plan, but actually knowing that there's that strategic framework that'll guide everything, and that there'll then be climate considerations on the agenda templates and all that kind of stuff. So it's very much, as long as that's already in the work program, which it is, then I think that starts to go some way to addressing their concerns and my concerns. And the other thing is around the Pykokoriki school student submissions. I know that they're not mentioned on this list, but I'm just wondering if we will be, or if staff will be going back to... Oh, they are? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. No, that's okay. Cool, thank you. Yeah, they were. I just wanted to make sure they were acknowledged or recognised in some way, yeah.
Oh, look, I don't think we finished the conversation, or you're talking about Waikanae Watch with regards to a connected pathway, and I think the Riki Association as well was talking to that. Yeah. Is that what's included as part of the work program, isn't it?
No, that's not included in the current. If there's a reference to current work program, then it's not included in the current work program. No, that's the current position. There was some other. I think they referenced the hall, which we talked about before in terms of renewals. I think Sasha was going to have a look at that. The other one was they wanted a connection from the basically the old state highway running along. I think it was the northern side of the river, all the way up through to past the water treatment plant and up towards the is it the Devil's Elbow area, which is where I think the Rikarangi Residents Association and has also talked about. I mean, there is an informal path that runs through some of that area, but it's not currently in the program in terms of an additional resource to do any more than what's there at the moment.
Just to update the council in terms of Waikanae Beach Hall, which I've sent through to Jocelyn. In the three years it's been there's budget there for asphalting in year 1 of 32.8k, painting in year 2, and building strengthening in year 2 also, which was 251.7k, and then in year 3 a stove replacement of close to $6,000, so a total of about 280. Close to 300,000 over the next 3 years on those projects, on the basis of the condition report and what needs to be done. And in terms of the seismic report, we're doing it this financial year, so we know what we're looking at in the longer term.
Just while we're backtracking, I would like an answer to the question that Jackie was trying to ask, which is why have we put off the dismal toilets in the Otaki Civic Theatre so far, so long into the future?
Short answer is I can't answer that right now. I'd have to look into that for you. Yeah.
Just to thank Sasha for providing that information. So even though it hasn't been assessed yet, there is some money just solely to do the strengthening, not to actually improve the quality of the hall.
Yes, in year 2. $252,000 approximately, but the seismic strengthening assessment has not been done, so that is a best guess at this point, and I'd probably urge a bit of caution in and around that number.
Oh, sorry. It went too fast, but I actually saw Waikanae Watch on there. I just wanted to know what that was about, because if we're supporting mana whenua, but then we're supporting the same community group that attacks mana whenua, how does that even work?
Well, anybody that makes a submission is entitled to a response. So it isn't about whether we support them or not. It is about the things that they talked to. Are they in our plan or not? Or what are we doing about them? So everybody gets a response.
So are we talking about something specific that they've asked for?
Yeah, look, we'll take that offline with you if that's okay, because we've actually just spoken about it for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, but you went too fast, and before...
So it was all that conversation that's just been had about a walkway up to Rugby through the river, and other items like that.
Oh, well, then I've made a mistake, because I thought the submission was about supporting their website. Okay, that's cool.
That's good.
Cool.
Are we on this current slide? Just in terms of the Youth Council's submission and their request for lighting, just wanting to understand what of the various locations they requested lighting in. Is any of that in any budgets? Or just better public lighting? What's the...
So from memory, they didn't specify anywhere in particular. So my understanding is that there isn't. Did they? Okay.
The corner of Marine Parade and Rangiu Road, I think, where the Memorial Rock is.
So I can tell you that any of the lights that were in reserves aren't being catered for. So anything to do with roading, Sean can answer.
Yeah, those specific. So we do have a
close to it. So if you're lighting it up.
It would be very hard pressed to put a light on at Kaitawa, but the McLean Park one, we had investigated options around solar powered night lights. So I'll actually remind my old team to look at that again.
There's not just the Youth Council submission to Horanga, Rangatahi submission as well. There's others that refer to lighting.
And do know the Youth Council wanted to be involved more with the open spaces strategy that's coming up. Yeah.
So I suggest that this is a good example of something we need to put in the medium-term work plan and say in another, over the course of the next 12 months, let's have a think about that one. We can't respond to it immediately. We can say we heard it, and let's have a think about how that might play out if that's acceptable to the table.
So again, work program, Rekarangi Residents Association as potential future work program. But other than that, noted Arts Trust saying awaiting specific application in the future.
Thank you. Yeah. So then again, I suppose again, I was just we had a little conversation, but I don't think there was an answer to what the potential future work program could be for that area. So that Riki Rangi.
Some of their submission was also around development of the reserve.
Yeah.
So but the parks team has been working with them specifically on what can be done there.
Thank you.
So just clarify, when it says work program, that means it'll be done within the existing work program or looked at. Thank you. With the Merrick's Music one, my thoughts on that was that it would be good to support it moving forward, but their application was incomplete and it would be a future annual plan discussion. Is that, I see it says awaiting specific, we can consider that through next year or the years after the annual plan.
I was just going to sort of Rangi residents say work program wise, there are a number of issues on there that related to widening of the road up through there and some other transport related issues that aren't currently on the current work program, and so if we're going to look at those, they would be a long way out in terms of priorities. So the issues that Alison raised around the reserve are probably more likely to be things that would be sooner rather than later, but those other requests would be well down the list in terms of priorities currently.
Thank you. So just following up on Merrick's Music, could that also be part of the Kapiti destination plan, the tourist plan?
We'll take it away. I mean, it's all part of what's interesting about our district. I can't give you an answer, but we'll put that to the team.
Really wrong. The Otaki Wakahoe Charitable Trust, that says work program, but it's more kind of aspirational than that, isn't it? Isn't it more like future exploration of some of the ideas that they have?
I'll let Sean speak in a moment if he wants to, but yes, agreed. But a lot of what they're doing is working with other parties like Greater Wellington and Fletchers, and that doesn't involve us. I think where Sean's team are working is on access and parking. Maybe he might want to speak to that. But what I can say from my perspective is we found that all a pretty exciting submission, and we're pretty keen to work with them going forward to see how that evolves.
Excellent.
And I know the regional council is keen on it.
Not only on if the regional council are keen, it'll be good to see some funding, I guess, in terms of.
Well, that's the next step, isn't it?
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, so it is what it is. That not there. So next.
This one is mainly noted as other than Manaaki Kapiti. Some of that was on work program.
Right.
Can I just say something?
It still says Jackie Elliott. I mean, I'm confused.
I can swap cards in a second. I just think we had some really amazing submissions about the airport. We've just been looking at Paul Callister's one and also the Mola Architects one. So I think that needs to be acknowledged, and we need to stick them in our back pocket as we explore our options, because there's some really amazing feedback in those submissions.
If I may, and I guess it seems like we're skipping through things as well. There has been a lot of discussion behind the scenes to come to this. It hasn't been a quick process of just writing note at a work program, and acknowledging that there are a lot of submissions that people have put a lot of time into, hence why we want to do proper responses to them, and anything that needs to be carried forward and continued to be referenced back, that will be happening.
As long as we understand, as far as the airport is concerned, they are clear. We need to give a vista of options and still enable councillors to have an open mind on this. I keep stressing that. Anything more on this one?
I've changed. Sorry. This is the next slide, second to last one before we open up discussion. So these are ones that are not included at all, so not in existing work programs, and we're not proposing to add them.
Councillor Holiday.
Just two I want to talk to on this one. First one was Otaki Canoe Club. The proposal for cleaning the toilet facility, is that part of the Windstone Lakes sort of submission, with regards to things that we're doing in there? Are we picking up the cleaning of that toilet at all? Or is this a separate thing?
It's tied in, but this is asking for us to help with assistance in actually maintaining it.
Yeah. Was that I can't remember his name, sorry. Max's submission, was it?
Oh, this toilet.
Yeah.
Near the lake.
Yeah, that's right, on the corner there.
No, I think this one would have been separate to Max Lutz. I'll just double check that.
And support was
offering to help.
Because that.
Offering to help to clean the toilet.
Yeah.
The other one was Jackie Reno's age-friendly building standards. Is that something that would potentially get picked up in a district plan sort of scenario with regards to building standards?
Yes, Mr. Chair, no. We would have to get some legal advice on how we could augment the building code requirements, and there will be stuff in the building code, but if we wanted to go to a higher level than that, we'd have to take some legal advice. Or do it by consent and agreement with the developer, which is something we could, but definitely not the district plan. So, yeah, sure.
Happy to take that offline.
But ultimately, talking to the wrong body, go to the government and ask them to raise the standards for age-friendly. Councils can't do that individually. It'd be very challengeable by developers and builders.
Are we clarifying whether the proposal for the cleaning and the... Okay.
And so last three. So this is Max Lutz's one here, the Friends of the Otaki River. So that was around the self-contained toilet. So all these three we're recommending are not included.
So do we not agree with Mr. Wiggs that the trees could drop branches and that they're not safe? Do we think they're just...
It's been an ongoing discussion, so we have done some work in there to tidy up the ones that were at risk of falling, and we've had a full arborist report, and it's on a schedule to have that happen every 2 years, and we're actively monitoring them, but we don't consider that there's a hazard there.
If we're going to be monitoring them and doing work over the coming years, maybe it should say work program.
Yeah.
So with the, I understand that they've fully funded the toilet itself and obviously going to put it in place. They will just, if it's not funded, they'll just need to try and meet that cost themselves. Is that the, because obviously we do it at the other one that come at great expense at the other end.
Yeah. It's on Greater Wellington land. It's been arranged with Greater Wellington. Greater Wellington maintains other toilets. I believe Councillor Compton's just been volunteered to raise it. We just think we've got to call these things and say, stop passing the buck on to us. If you want to do this with Greater Wellington needs to pay. I know it's the same ratepayer, so it's kind of a, you know, I can think of another solution that might resolve that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a follow-up question to Janet. So in relation to Mr. Wiggs, is he aware of this 2-yearly work program?
We've had multiple meetings on site and various email conversations. So yes.
Thank you.
It was a learning curve for me. People don't understand what I'm talking about. That's right. Right, next.
Okay, so now's the really exciting part. Anything that we haven't covered off that you are wanting an opportunity to bring forward for further discussion, bearing in mind that we are currently at 7.96%.
Sorry, what is that?
7.96.
How's that insurance fund feeling? Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, so I just want to consider the very detailed and well thought out submission that suggested providing wastewater in Pykokoriki.
I was going to say, we're not going to give people.
You can have mine.
Do we all come down like once a week?
Happy to contribute. Happy to contribute.
You want to rephrase that?
To connect Pykokoriki to a wastewater system. So the suggestion in the submission was that over the next 10 or 20 years, a lot of Pykokoriki properties who put in septic tanks in the 50s will have to replace them, and that a comparative cost analysis should be done to see whether, in dollar terms, it's going to be cheaper for them to do that or contribute to a wastewater system. I just think it should be flagged because it was quite a well thought through argument. I wouldn't expect, I think we'd pretty much blow our rates rise out of the water if we consider doing it now, but I just think it's come to the table, and I just think we just need to put it in the back pocket.
Here's a go at trying to have a bob each way. Massive undertaking, sort of thing that you couldn't do without having consulted on it. You've heard me say, though, a few times that I anticipate, and I'm, you know, this is just my view, that within 2 or 3 years it's going to be brought in as a requirement, and you may have 10 years or whatever to implement it. Whoever you is as the water organisation. I'm happy that we go and have a think about whether we could do a little bit of work on a kind of a business case light. What would we be talking about? Just so you could come back and inform me, but I'm talking light, not a big piece of work, because that back of an envelope.
Fastest $50,000 ever.
So, I think Pykokoriki is about 700 odd houses, $10,000 per house, $7 million for septic tank replacement potentially these days, that sort of order of cost. Treatment plant to deal with that sort of volume would be at least, I would have thought, 10 to 15 plus, and then on top of that you've got consenting, and at the moment we are struggling to consent any sort of discharge unless it's discharged to land, so therefore you would struggle to get the land down at Pykokoriki to have a treatment plant that would discharge for 700 properties onto an area of land which would be well in excess of both the Tilly Triangle and plus some of QE Park. So
he's such a wet blanket, right?
So did you say it wouldn't go down well?
I will tell you a little tale, councillor. A CEO was telling me about many years ago. They went through this in an area. So many years ago. So the dollars are all wrong compared to today. But it was $900 per connection, where Sean said $10,000 to replace a septic tank. It was $900 per section. The uplift on their property values, because they were then able to change the district plan and allow them to subdivide, was $20,000 per section, per house. So Sean and I are in a slightly different space on this. I just want you to understand that there are potentially benefits to landowners and residents as part of that business case, which is why I'm happy to do a little bit of thinking on it, but no promises to do a piece of work on it. And you've heard that it doesn't stack up per se, but when you add it to potential uplift in property values as a result and ability to subdivide down to smaller, it's something to think about, but it's not in the work program.
Sorry, just while I've still got the mic, there was Carol Rehana's Poe as well, which hasn't been mentioned tonight.
I just wanted to pick up on an earlier theme around the feasibility study for an indoor sports centre. And I guess I'm not wedded to the idea that it has to be in this coming year of the long-term plan. It could be years 2 or 3. But I think just in terms of we're having discussions about an indoor sports centre or doing something at the school, there's discussions about how we use Ngā Purapura, there's discussions about Aotearoa Park and what we could do there, there's a question around the community centre. I think it would be useful if we had some sort of feasibility study so we could look across the whole district, what we're doing, what's the best solution, rather than doing a whole lot of little piecemeal bits of work. And that could provide the advice we need. You know, it could come out and say that we need to bring Aotearoa Park forward in terms of the indoor sports facility there, or it could say we need to have something in conjunction with the community centre. But I just wanted to sort of chuck that in the mix. I sort of appreciate that people might psychologically want to keep this below 8% for this year, so just something that I'd be keen to ask people to support for either years 2 or 3 of the LTP, so we have it in there for that, because obviously the sort of investment decisions that might flow on from that will be a lot further down the track, but I think it would be useful to sort of use that as the opportunity to, I guess, solve that indoor sports centre discussion for the district once and for all, hopefully. I'm also mindful that obviously Councillor Randall's been supportive of it and Jackie Elliott sort of made some noises around it too. So,
I'm told, and so I noted with interest, that Karen Parker said in terms of the money that's in there for the college, just get on and do it. She didn't put in a submission this time saying, I want money for a feasibility. She said, just get on and do it. Well, I thought that was interesting. That's not the same as responding to your point. But I just did want to flag that, yeah, I acknowledge that what we're proposing was about an elegant solution to a different issue. It wasn't about long-term solving the problem. So this is one of those ones. We're in your hands. It's an interesting way to approach it. Put it off for a year or 2 so that you can reconfirm nearer the time if that still looks like it's needed. Totally in your hands.
Discussion on this issue, not new ones yet. So, on this matter, any discussion? Councillor Holbrook.
I guess 50,000 like the other feasibility things we've done.
Oh, sure,
financial. Most of those septic tanks would be in the rears of those properties, so you then have to pump it to the road.
I give up.
So it wasn't long ago that we did a district-wide facilities review. So we could dig that out of the bottom drawer and update that, because it's probably about time we did so with various changes that have been happening. Alison would know all about that.
There's now also the regional facilities plan that Sport Wellington did, so that gives guidance about what's needed across the region at different levels of hierarchy for national, local, regional. So that gives guidance as well, and from a regional perspective, not just local.
Yeah, but we're not giving them the $10,000.
No, so that $10,000 is to help deliver the facilities plan, where we're saying we've already got the plan and we've got staff that can actually work on that anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I support this. I think we not just sports facilities, but have particularly with looking to replace the community centre here and these various discussions about indoor facilities here or there. I think I think it's kind of apparent that we need a little bit of a look in a broader strategic way. I support Councillor Compton's suggestion.
And then the indoor bowling people want to share. Anybody else on this one?
I partially support it. I just wanted to test with Gwyn because he is talking about out in the latter years. There is a document that many of these councillors wouldn't have seen around the community facilities strategy. There's discussions around Aotearoa Park, which had, in some ways preceded or before your time. So I wondered whether an interim was to have a discussion around some of that work, the needs that would then lead into the consideration of that feasibility study in year 2 or 3. So the timeline remains the same, but it's simply having some discussions before then around, and you might decide stop go there around, okay, we've now got more information or new information, stuff might have been progressed over the Paraparumu stuff. So same timeline.
But we've got a contractual agreement with Paraparumu College, right? So at the minimum, we need to do something there.
And I think further to what James was saying, if we have it in years 2 or 3, then that gives us an opportunity to have a look at that stuff. And when it comes to that annual plan, if we've established that there is stuff that could address it or we don't need it, then we can reassess that then. But at least, I guess that's one of the sort of things we've had is that it needs to get in the into the LTP to get considered at some point down the track. And this at least gets it in there, and then we can do some of that preliminary work, and we can see if it fits into a wider facilities sort of strategy review as well, which I think is a really good way to fit it in, given that, as Councillor Holborough said, that we've got these other sort of gnarly facilities questions going on too. So I think that, I'll be happy with that. I can't see it on the Excel tables.
No, actually, I just wanted to just throw something else into that conversation, although it is something slightly different. It's more around the, well, not more around, we're talking about community facilities. We have budgeted money for the community centre, and I was just wondering whether, we take that blue sky approach with regards to what that even looks like tied into that conversation. We've had people talking about the facility that's up in Levin, say, for argument's sake. Could it be something that's done as an add-on to the library, say, for argument's sake? That could be an opportunity for that broader discussion with regards to how that could fit in to that equation as well. It could be all-encompassed. I don't know. Starting to get pretty grandiose, but it could be just could be part of that conversation as well. Just thoughts.
Thank you. That was a very long wait for a red light to say yes, Councillor. In that the conversation around the community centre will have to address at a high level what the current needs within the community are, as opposed to assuming that we are replicating something that meets the needs that existed when that facility was initially developed.
But very unlikely to include sporting endeavour for reasons of budget, location, and lots of other things. So I appreciate you yourself said let's not get grandiose, but that kind of needs assessment for every one of our new developments is going to happen as well as we can do them. Slightly different to the strategic overview about all facilities, but yep, the staff, you've heard the staff say they want to take that approach to the developments.
And finally, ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you 35.
Thank you. I support what Gwen is saying. I did go to the open day yesterday, I think it was. Yumoki, what's her name? Yumoki, is doing around the consultation on the community centre. And they're going out and finding out, what do you do, how do you do it, why do you do it? And it's really good. So I think that a study for an indoor sport and rec centre, which should sit alongside that while communicating with, engaging with the community now around the community centre. And that's a really good information gathering exercise, I thought. And there were some other people there with some really good ideas. So I just think they should sit side by side.
Thank you. Sasha.
Just through you, Chair, I was just going to say that talking individually about certain projects can mean that you don't necessarily look at the bigger picture across the district. And so there are a lot of plans and strategies and things like that, and I'm wondering if it's useful for the team who know a lot in this space to look at all those and maybe come back and suggest if there's any gaps of information that we don't have for council in terms of a needs assessment or what have you, because there'll be a lot of IP in the space already. It's just that we haven't looked at it globally as opposed to a project here, a project there, a project there. So I don't want to generate work for myself, but I don't want you to look at individual items either without the broader context when you've got staff that are dealing with this every day that might be able to assist.
Are we just on the individual councillor topics? Just I want to make sure I don't get in the wrong spot on the line. Look at most of the ones, what's that? Limit of 3. 3 pages. It's 3 pages. Look, most of the ones that I've got, I think would be as just responses or with an existing work budget. So I'm happy to rattle off the titles. And if you want to bring it back to Tuesday, they're not relating to, do you want me to do it that way? So the one that did come through the submissions and it had been raised in the community and by Nahapu Otaki as well was the tidy up of the basketball court at Otaki Beach. So that could be more used by youth, and so it's happening in the existing budgets. Awesome. And then the other one was that discussion around the community hub, and that sort of fitted alongside the LTP aspirations around that library community development. So Adrian Gregory put a submission in the previous LTP, brought that back to this one. So I guess I'm really just asking that we consider that alongside those other discussions around community hubs, the CAB, the food banks, and so forth. And then there was a submission from the Otaki Museum, and actually, not trying to be disrespectful, but it was a little bit hard to determine from the submission what they were specifically asking for, and I think it was with some certainty. So really just having a bit more of a look around that, it'd be helpful for us to know, as elected members, what the staff response is to that one particularly, around, so that's the Otaki Museum submission. And there was one which is a tricky one, but it's around papakainga or kaumātua housing. And I don't think that's something that we can solve immediately, but I think it is something that we need to look at. The interesting part that I hadn't thought about, and it was in the hearings on the Wednesday night, I can't remember which one of the 3 hapu mentioned, but it is getting to the point where ahika or hapu and iwi from within the community are actually getting forced out of the community to the point that there is a risk that the marae no longer has caretakers within the community to continue operating a marae. So I don't know if Natalia's got anything further to add on that, but the important aspect of it was some thinking, and I guess working in partnership possibly around papakainga housing moving forward, because we can't change the increase in house prices, and we can't, there's only so much we can do, but the risk is that we will lose those people from within the community. And then I had one more, but I see that you want to respond.
Well, I'll just
to that.
respond to that one. It is very live in our housing program. So yes, absolutely, and there is access to government funding as part of that. We've had hui, I think, with all 3 iwi on this.
And one
2.
more to come.
So I had attended the one up with Ngā Hapu, or one of the hui about that, and it was we assured them that we were as keen as they were to progress in that space. So there isn't something concrete I can say to you now, but it is very live.
Thank you. And I had one more, but I see someone else's lot. I don't know whether... Oh, it's separate. Oh, okay. And so the last one was around, there was a submission, I think 2 actually, on the road width. It's quite specific, but the road width in Otaki in one block of the downtown, and it was through the main street upgrade, and essentially we we got it wrong or it didn't in reality turn out. And so the second half of Main Street, you notice, is wider because they changed midway through the project. And so the request here is simply to look at that, see whether there are any changes that can be made, modest changes, and then consider that for any future, whether it's in year 2 or 3 or 4, but simply for staff to, I guess, investigate and have a look at what the options are there.
Yeah, happy to have a look at that, see whether that's feasible, but it's likely to involve potentially taking away car parks and things like that, but happy to do that work. There is, as you've mentioned, there's no funding as such at the moment to do anything, but you could program something in the next couple of years.
Cool. So I just have one around, and I'm not necessarily sure if this is the right place to or right time to bring it up, but I guess this is kind of our only chance. The community educator for climate, I've been chatting a bit with Ninka, and she said that that's in there, but it's in the corporate budget. So where do we find the exact money, or where does that show up? So I'm just wanting to, I guess, get some assurance that that's in there. Climate.
I don't know anyone who would disagree with Ninka.
Perfect.
I'll take that as a
See?
Yeah. Oh, Ninka also said no.
Yeah, we did have an extra resource in there, so don't worry about the details of where it shows up or how it shows
cool.
up.
Just making sure
if it is in our approved budgets, and I'm only saying if Ninka has said it's in there, then it's in there. So, but we can double check that and come back to you on Tuesday as to what that means.
So now we know.
Sean's looking confused, but I thought there was some education resource, some slight extra in the budget, but
There's some funding, but the actual resource was what it doesn't kick in until next financial year if we're talking about the same role. We have confirmed a couple of fixed terms into FTEs, but I think there was one additional that was in that group that was potentially pushed out to next financial year, but there is extra funding to get some external resource to help with that education. But I'll check that and come back on Tuesday to confirm it.
I think, that was really cool. And the PO as well was something that I picked up through Carol Dayhana's submission, and also just those minor changes to the Climate Emergency Action Framework. But I'll chat with Alison and understanding that that's going to come back in a separate. Yeah.
In terms of the PO, I think it's year 2 and 3, or maybe years 3 and 4, out years of the long-term plan, there is additional funding. I think it's a collaboration between the iwi Partnerships team and the Arts and Heritage team around some mana whenua heritage signage and artwork and things like that. I think the initial proposal had an Otaki focus, but we've been talking within the team about taking more of a district-wide look at that, and I think through that funding we could explore the PO for Pykokoriki or whatever else in Pykokoriki was appropriate at that time.
Thank you. Just a couple of things I wanted to just touch base on. One, I may have missed this before. Where you talked to the Grey Street congestion down by the school. Was there anything? Yeah. Is there anything included in the plan around that?
Yep. So there is a proposal there. I think we've got on order some speed warning signs and some other minor improvements that we can do down there. At the moment, the major funding is still sitting in year 3, I think 3 to 5.
3 to 5, and put it forward to 3 to 5 and 6. Thank you.
It's in year 6, the funding for that potentially. But there is, so the response will be, the response is we can do something with the current budget to try and make things better there, but a significant part of that will be looking at parking restrictions in and around the school, because that's one of the key things that we can do very quickly to help manage the congestion around there.
Yep. The Wharimaku stream restoration, the committee is met, we've had the meeting around that, and I think that's maybe a pet project of yours, Mr. Mayor. Is that included, or is that picked up in any work streams or anything like that at all, or is it part of a process at all? Just curious.
So we're currently working on a stormwater management plan and the strategy that goes with that. So we've had a number of hui looking at that across the district. The Wharamuku stream could potentially form part of a separate project within that in terms of looking at restoration. There is already a management plan for that stream, but it's 2008-9. It's well out of date. So and there certainly has been some conversations with Te Atiara about looking at a joined up approach to developing an improved management plan for that stream. So that could potentially be funded as part of next year's work program for stormwater.
Talking to someone day before yesterday, and I haven't been down to have a look, but at the beach end they're saying it's really grubby, and I know it's the peat that comes through, but he was talking about some issues down there. It needs cleaning up or something. So has anybody from staff been down there recently to have a look? It's at the down Matatua roadway. But I do know that the group's come to the community board for some funding, which will give them for shovels and things, but that'll be up this end, not.
I wasn't aware of it, but happy to. They've put a service request into council, or but I'll have a chat tomorrow to staff to go and have a look.
One last thing, I just want to touch on Wellsong and the park, with the Wharanui and Wharimaku, the park area there. Whether look, I appreciate they've presented. Haven't asked for council funds as such, but as a space. Does that tie into what you're talking about with the hydro stuff or anything, or is there any consideration for the park at the moment as we move forward?
That isn't currently part of that consideration. It's not to say that wouldn't complement what's proposed in terms of the whale song, but you could progress with that work in conjunction with potentially what's happening there. But there is a report coming to this June the something. Early June, there's a paper coming to council to present and talk to the whale song proposal and provide you some further information on what's potentially in there and what that means.
Robinoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just following up on a couple of items that were made in submissions. One was, I know, Alison, there have been a few conversations about a fenced dog park in Waikanae, and I'm just wondering whether there's anything in the
so
pot.
In the current budget, there's allowance for 2, maybe 3 dog parks over the next 3 years, one of which would be in Waikanae, but there'd be work with the community about whereabouts it would be, but the first thought is it would be next to the Ryman's, so we've identified an area there that we could do a small dog park, as in a dog park for small dogs as opposed to a small park. Because that's particularly what Waikanae had asked for. So it's in the budget.
So that's a fenced one, is it?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Okay, that's great. And so someone else made a comment, and this is a CWB matter, about joining up Ngāmanu to Waikanae North, the cycleway.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes, so basically this is CWB stuff in terms of potentially linking Ngāmanu to Waikanae North with a cycleway, CWB stuff.
There isn't allowance in the budget, but as developments come in, we look to take reserve contributions that allow for that connection to happen. So, for example, from Manu Gardens, with the proposed reserve there, it creates a link through. So then if there's another subdivision, we'd get the next link. So we're doing it in that way.
Okay. And so the other one is to do with cleaning drains. Is that just part of the, is that prioritised, or how does that all work in terms of cleaning drains or ensuring
If you
that they are clean.
if you talk to Kathy, they're funding shovels.
Might be the real big one.
Sean, do you want to respond to how we manage drain cleaning?
So yes, there is a schedule of drains that we clear. I'm not sure. What is the actual question in terms of?
So I know along the beach, the northern end of Waikanae, there's a drain there that is basically affecting properties all the way up to Pykokoriki. And it used to be cleaned, but it's not anymore. And it might be well, it might. Yeah, I'll talk offline. I just thought I'd just raise it now.
There is, sorry, just one thing I just wanted to ask about, and that's just the entrance to down the boat ramp down at on McLean Street at the boat club there. The tidying up of the entrance down onto the Paraparamu beach, was that getting perhaps picked up in the beach bylaw side of things, or even to Rehi, or?
Yep, so the money that was set aside to install the barrier includes improving that whole access, so removing that island that's in between the two lanes, the road island inside the driveway and the car park. Yep, so that's all part of improving that whole access down. Yep.
Just a follow-up question, just for my interest and maybe other people's interest. So when are those barriers likely to go in for the two boating clubs?
It's in year 2 at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd just like to say something because I haven't spoken for half an hour and people might think I'm dead.
I want to know why we had more sludge in the last quarter.
So it looks like we're all done. It looks like we're all done. So we're still having a session next Tuesday?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I just wondered whether we could bring some feedback through Tuesday around the LTP, around the submissions, and some good stuff around feedback and ideas.
I'll let Alison talk to it, but in my opinion, that might not be needed on Tuesday because responses to submissions, if that's what you're talking about, is going to take a bit longer. Have I understood you correctly?
The process itself.
Yeah. So, do you want to?
I can talk about that now. So, following adoption, I'm out. I'll be doing a very extensive handover to the corporate planning manager. So we're working on the engagement plan now. So each individual submitter will get a full response. That will take some time depending on the complexity of the submitter. There'll be the response booklet that goes out directly to everyone that's submitted, and that becomes a community resource. So we'll start working on that now based on the guidance that we've had tonight. So the aim for that is a week after adoption, we've had that big bulk of feedback to the community, and so to give that wrap up, but the individual ones will be a bit longer than that. I wouldn't want to commit to a time frame until I've talked with.
I'm more talking about, so I get all that, and it's more things about, like, as an elected member, the documents aren't searchable and stuff like that. So it's just an opportunity for a debrief or a feedback on different aspects and all that stuff.
So again, I'd say let us catch a breath probably, but I think probably what you're driving at is before we forget all the good stuff that we've picked up on. So take that away, figure out the right time. Still think that's probably not Tuesday. We got to get this stuff over the line, and this is hard going. Okay. And we're about to hear what the number is, I reckon. And I just want to say to you that whatever the number is, I think it's too high now. And I think part of what you need to reflect on now is whether you're willing to do some really hard yards and say no to something. So that would be my steer. But hey, it's not me who has to front this in a funny kind of way, except for you'll all say it was the chief executive's fault. I get that. But I want to leave you with that takeaway. What is the number, Andrew? Have you got it? Whoa! I thought you would have popped over the 8. So
Well, it's there.
maybe you'll tell me I'm wrong. Just want you to think seriously about it, though. Probably coming into today, I still felt if you have consulted on 7.8, we've had, as Councillor Holborough noted, quite a surprising amount of support given. This is a huge number overall. Not overwhelming support, but to have stayed on 7.8 would have been a pretty good outcome. You may not be able to do that, but if there's something that we need to think about on Tuesday when you come back is, are you happy with 7.96, or do you want to think about making a couple of hard decisions? And I'm not talking Waikanae transfer station at all, because that was what I heard someone else say. So.
Can I ask that?
Correct.
No. Can I ask that we get a list of what the changes are, so that we can think or we can see which one we want to look at. Having said that, Rob.
Well, I was going to say exactly what the CE was saying, which is just horrifying. And yeah, I know. But what he didn't say was insurance fund. Let's rate that. And how much does that, seriously, how much does that pull us back by?
I thought you were asleep, Councillor, or dead. If you take away the whole fund, you'll make quite a significant difference, and I will go and cry in my sleep or for the next week.
So
you have these.
What does the fund?
Really...
I told you I was going to say this. I warned you. What does the fund look like if, as the CE was suggesting, we land on the same amount, which was 7.8? What does that?
Yeah. No, but can I just say, look, this is what used to happen whenever we had depreciation, and Grey Power used to come and say, take that out to reduce the rates, and then long term we get stuffed. So caution.
Oh, Your Worship, I've been involved in a number of insurance renewals over the last few months, and one very big company, there was only one insurer that would insure this company. It's based in Wellington, $180 million of assets, and we couldn't get other than one quote, one firm. And I think what Mark was saying before is absolutely true. I think it's really prudent. It's not the amount of money, it's the signal that it sends that we are actually trying to look after our own affairs. And I think it would be the last thing you'd want to change, my personal view.
Gary. 345.
So we can leave 345 in there and stay at 7.8%.
We need to make the hard decisions elsewhere.
Yes.
Gary.
No, I agree with Brian, because I think what you're really doing is you're going against a worldwide trend. You're reducing your investment in insurance. What you've proposed is you've bought your cover, and you've also used some savings for a lower level of cover to establish a fund that you're going to aggregate year on year. And I know there's a reluctance to commit funds when there doesn't appear to be an automatic use for it, when you could borrow if you needed it. I understand that, but the reality is that insurance costs are rising, and you're not sort of connected to the market if you believe you're getting it cheaper. And I think what you've done is, if you project forward to a three waters different environment, your cover is going to be on a lesser range of assets, and you will, by the time that comes, you will have built yourself a fund that will enable you to meet the initial costs of a number of things at a local level. Be they buildings, be they parks, be they equipment on parks. You're going to be that much further ahead than you otherwise would if you take the savings now. That's my view. And I think Brian used different words, but basically the same.
So anyway, you got a chance to think it over.
Do people want to have a Zoom chat on Tuesday, or are we happy to leave it till Tuesday? Just an offline discussion.
Throw it out there, for one to do it.
I'll send an email out.
I'll try and get a wrap up. I will get a wrap up by tomorrow night, just outlining what movements there have been today. It's a bit of a brief recap so you can reflect, and then it'll come back in more detail on Tuesday, and then any other things that you've asked to come back with as well.
Jocelyn, you got something to say?
Yes, so an average 1.6 is what we're talking about here. Is there any calculation, does anyone know what that potentially means in terms of dollar terms for the average ratepayer increase? Yeah.
No, but that can be part of what we can come back and advise you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Right. Mr. McCann.
I would advise that we change the line 216 or H4 back to what I suggested before, because we've got an opportunity to rediscuss it, but it also means that in the media for the next few days we have not put up the projected number, and it gives us an opportunity to have a discussion without that getting out and being the focus that we've increased rates on what we've gone out and consulted.
I think if we take it out, we're going to have a hard road putting it back in, and I don't want to see it reduced. And we need it to a poll.
Before Mr. Mayor wraps up, I just want to reiterate: do reflect on these things long and hard, because in a funny kind of way, you've worked really, really hard, but you haven't had to make really, really hard decisions. I think you have opted for easy decisions. You've heard me speak a couple of times about a couple of issues where I probably disagree with what you've said, but that's cool. It's your call. But I want you to think long and hard about it, because you'll have opposition to some things, and every time you take the easy route, you're actually making it harder in future. We've got an 8.25 the following year, 8.5 the year after. You need to go away thinking, I know how to make hard decisions in some spaces, because they're going to get harder. It's just my feedback. I know we've done a whole lot of this for you, and sometimes you'll say, well, you haven't given me $100 million worth of rankings, and I accept that. We can take stuff away and do more work in the coming year, so that when we have an annual plan discussion, we inform the opportunities or the options. But just realise that when I'm looking around the table here, I haven't really seen you make a really tough one and be in the minority and know how it feels. So that's just my feedback to you. I know some of you are quite concerned about the size of the rates increase anyway. We aren't able to make significant changes to it, but any little increase might be a little bit of a knock to our ratepayers. If you work really hard to keep it at 7.8 without taking the easy route in the short term, that's a good thing to do. If you can't, that's cool. You just need to know that's what you've done.
That's really good. What you're saying is we need to go to the gym and build muscles. Look, it's been actually really, really good working with all of us. And thank you for the staff support behind us. That's made it easy to land our discussions. I know throughout the process, I'm as chair, I can handle it if one or two throw hissy fits and leave, but don't all of us do it at the same time. But it's been really good. So thank you very much for your cooperative and the spirit in which you've engaged with it, and thank you to the staff. Thank you.